All right, so today we're going to be talking about biogeochemical cycles. And biogeochemical cycles, as it says here, is the recycling of inorganic matter between living organisms and their non-living environment, so called because biology, geology, and chemistry, biogeochemical, all of those sciences are involved in this. And so before we were talking about trophic levels, we discussed that there was a certain amount of energy that came in, usually in the form of sunlight, although it could be in the form of chemicals, depending on what kind of organisms we're talking about. And that sunlight would go into these plants. There would be all of this energy concentrated at that first trophic level, at the sort of producer level. And then as you increased, that heat got dissipated. So every level you go up, every trophic level you increase, the more heat, the more energy is gone from that because it's dissipated as heat. The overall entropy of the universe is always increasing, which it's more of a physics thing, but you should remember that as you increase trophic levels, energy decreases. But these biogeochemical cycles, things do not go away. They do not decrease. And basically, if you look around, all of the molecules that you're seeing, all the elements that you're seeing on Earth have pretty much been here since Earth was created. Sure, we do sometimes send some things to space, and sure, we do have a lot of things striking the Earth and adding new elements, but by and large, everything that's around is just a recycled version of when we first, the planet was first created. So let's talk about what elements or what actual cycles we're going to be talking about. We have the water cycle, super important. We have the carbon cycle, and there's sort of two different versions. There's the biological carbon cycle, and then there's the biogeochemical carbon cycle. And we're going to talk about how those two are connected. We're going to talk about the nitrogen cycle, the phosphorus cycle, and the sulfur cycle. Why are we talking about these elements in particular? Well, these elements in particular are the most common elements in life, and we're going to talk about it for a second here, what each of them does for us. So carbon is most of the biomass that you see around you. Trees are made out of carbon. Carbon is in every single one of your four major biomolecules, which we are going to discuss. Carbon is called life's central molecule because of its chemical characteristics. It can do things like make four bonds. It's not super electronegative. Don't necessarily worry about that, but we're talking about carbon because carbon is very important for life. We also have nitrogen. Nitrogen is super important. Apart from being 80% of the atmosphere, nitrogen is one of the key components in your DNA and in your protein. So every little bit of protein that you have has a bunch of nitrogen in it. All right, what's next on the list? Next is phosphorus. Why is phosphorus important? Phosphorus is another component of your DNA, so pretty important stuff. It's also it's one of the main ingredients in fertilizers. It's used a lot in agriculture, and as we'll see, it has huge impacts on water. So when too much nitrogen and too much phosphorus get into the water, you have things like algal blooms, which we're going to talk about. But phosphorus, it's another super important element for life. We also have sulfur. Sulfur is very important in the folding of your proteins. It's also very often released into the atmosphere when we burn fossil fuels. So yeah, again, sulfur, critical for proteins, another super important element for life. And the last one is actually a molecule, and that is water, which is oxygen and hydrogen. And I wanted to define for you the hydrosphere really quick. So we talked about the biosphere. That's everywhere that life can exist on the planet. We also have this thing called the hydrosphere, which is the area of water movement, the area on Earth where water movement and storage occurs. So the hydrosphere you can think of as where is the water? This is things like oceans. This is things like glaciers. This is things like clouds, rivers, streams, lakes, ponds. All right, so we're going to be looking at these elements and one molecules biogeochemical cycling. Again, they don't dissipate like energy does. They are just continuously recycled on Earth. And the reason I showed it to you in this form is because this is what they look like on the periodic table. So in their original sort of context, these are what all of these elements, these are where all of these elements are centered, sort of over here on the top right, with hydrogen being the only weird exception. So I thought I would show you guys that because it is kind of interesting. So in the next lecture, I'm going to get into talking about the water cycle. I'm going to get into talking about how water moves on planet Earth.